RevOpsAF, the only podcast for people who are RevOpsAF and want to learn all about things that are RevOps AF.
Our goal is to give the revenue operations community, that includes marketing, sales, and CS for any of you not paying attention, the skills needed to accelerate their careers.
Hello, everybody, and today I am with Tana Jackson, who is the Global Head of Revenue Operations over at Chronicle Heritage, and we are going to be talking about a couple of different things. One, how RevOps can be more strategic versus being a ticket taker, how you can help your company see the true value that a quality RevOps leader can bring, and then how you can also bring all this stuff together and set the best goals for your RevOps teams to ultimately drive the best business outcomes for your company. So we're going to hit on a couple of different things today, but Tana, thank you very much for joining. And I guess one, I'll let you add anything to that maybe personal or professional introduction that I gave you there at the beginning.
Oh, no, that was perfect. Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. I mean, Matt, I've been watching and listening to your stuff for a long time, so happy to join the podcast and see what I can lend to the audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so first question, and I know back when we first started about 4 years ago, I was thinking about RevOps and the revenue operations role, and I'm a sports fan. You're in San Diego. I don't know if you're a Padres fan, but
Of course, you can't live here and not be a Padres fan.
As a baseball fan, I watch a lot of games, and on every baseball team, there's this notion of the utility player, someone who basically does whatever the team needs them to do on that day, right? Like you need them to play second base, they can play second base. You need them to pinch hit, they can come off the bench and pinch hit. You need them to play left field, they can play left field, right? They are just truly go where the business needs them, which is very different than other position players who are like, I play shortstop, right? I play third base.
Right.
And same thing on revenue and go-to-market teams, right? You typically have people who are marketers or salespeople or customer success folks, but RevOps is very different, right? RevOps is meant to support the entire revenue engine. And one day you may be knee deep in Salesforce, right? Building some new flow or some integration. The next week you might be presenting to the board about quarterly results. And the week after you could be training the sales team or the CS team on a new process, right? And so it's very broad, right? Which is why I always use the utility player example. But within that, you can fall into this, I don't know if it's a trap, right? But part of the job is to execute, to get stuff done. And I think that's inherent to the nature of every operator. So first question for you, Tana, is how do you, being in RevOps, it might be easy for folks who also enjoy that type of work to fall into the trap of being the ticket taker versus doing the more strategic stuff that I think we all maybe want to do, but aren't necessarily always able to do. So how should people first think about that within their role and how to avoid that trap, if you will?
That's a great question. I think that's a commonality between anybody in RevOps. So when we take that analogy of being the utility player, we can do a lot of things. We can do a lot of things across the board. We understand a lot of things, whether it be the systems, the processes, how to do it all. So you do become that go-to person for every question, everything that needs done, especially if you have to touch a lot of it. So we do tend to find ourselves at any point in time being the ticket taker. And it's not the place that we want to be because we want to do the fun stuff. Like we want to build the projects. We want to run with the business goals. We want to be able to go do like the fun things. One of the biggest parts for me personally, what I've figured out on this journey in RevOps myself is switching from being more proactive about things. Like when you're seeing something, get ahead of it instead of reactive behind it. And then always asking the questions, does this align to the business operations process and goals? And what are we going to get out of this? Is it, I need this fixed because I'm getting an error. Okay, great. That's really quick. I can go do that really fast. Or I've got a bigger project management, setting a whole entire sales playbook together and redoing the sales forecasting process. That's going to take a lot more time. So it's the prioritization of all of those tasks and being able to actually push back on stuff. I have found a lot more success in trying to get out of the ticket taking, even though it's going to be part of your job no matter what. It's just how do you time manage your own priorities and how do you manage those tickets? And then being very, very transparent in communication with the stakeholders, saying, you know what, I can't get to this, or we need to, what can I take off of my plate to add to my plate in order to just make sure we're still getting the things done that we need to get done. You're going to be tactical, but you need to be strategic as well. Always thinking ahead. Any of those things that are coming into you or any of the projects in the business, you need to be thinking 5 steps ahead of them. What are you going to need? And then being able to align it to your own roadmap and RevOps. That's kind of where I have found that good gel in the middle of that, because it is really hard. Like me personally right now, I do feel like I am more tactical at the moment because that is what the business calls for. We've got our roadmap of larger projects where I'm able to be more strategic and we're putting all of that together. But in the moment, you have to be able to be flexible in both of those. I would say this is probably the struggle with every RevOps professional, unless you're literally only strategy and you don't have to touch. Or if you have a big giant team that you can delegate it all, and you only have to do strategic stuff. So
Yeah. You mentioned the team aspect and actually in your own personal experiences here too. So I'm curious, how is Chronicle Heritage set up on the RevOps side right now? What does your current team look like? What's their kind of charter? And then after you kind of walk us through that, I'll ask you a question on kind of how you handle some of the tactical versus
yeah,
strategic
that's
stuff.
a really great question. I am actually the lone RevOps person right now. I
Yeah.
have one other RevOps. She's leaning more into the deal desk contract management. We're running really lean right now. I mean, fortunately, I'm not inundated with a ton of technical systems. We've got Salesforce, we've got ZoomInfo, I've got all of the sales side of it. We've got a smaller sales team. So it's a little bit more, I would say, not easy to handle. I'm the lone admin. It is a lot of it is one of those situations where I would love to be more strategic, but in the process of where we're at of redefining so many different things all at once, it is leaning in more tactical because I'm the only person there. We do get a lot of support from our technology side. We do have contractors that help support. So it's like we've got extra partners out there to support with a lot of the bigger things, but for the most part, a very small team.
Yeah.
Meaning
Yeah.
me, I'm team.
Yeah. Yeah. There is no I in team unless you are the team.
Yes, exactly,
Uh,
exactly.
yeah. And so, have you, whether it's at Chronicle Heritage or in prior roles, have you felt yourself ever maybe falling into, again, I don't want to use the word trap, but like maybe it's falling into the habit of being the ticket taker, like being more reactive instead of proactive, like you mentioned? And if so, what are some things that folks can do to escape that trap, if you
Yeah,
will?
absolutely. I think what has been a benefit to me is creating as many SOPs or training things that you have and trying, again, we're all using AI, automating any of those redundant tasks, building out a content library so that people can self-serve. Because a lot of the tickets that you're getting are things that happen repetitively. You may have a one off that is something that you do have to go look at. But for the most part, a lot of the stuff, me personally, in my role now, are things that are happening consistently. So it is just making sure you have directions or instructions or cheat sheets or playbooks, any of that stuff that can back you up so you don't have to continuously have to go manually and verbally, whatever it is that you need to do. And then also cross training people. I think I'm a big train the trainer. We've got SDRs and BDRs and marketing and a lot of sales team. I try to give them as much information as possible so that I can say, hey, if you have a question with us, go ask so and so about it. That's been a lot of my strategic stuff to take some of that weight off of my shoulders to have to really take every single question that's coming in. And another big one is to create any kind of group chats that you have, whether it be, and I know we do this, but create your sales team group chat, create your CS group chat, create your SDR, BDR group chat. That way the questions are funneled into one place, or you can constantly provide feedback or information in those channels that they can find. So I
Yeah.
think any of those little shortcuts for me is the name of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense. Essentially trying to fire yourself or delegate as many of those things out either to other people, like you mentioned, bringing on some contractors, consultants, other folks to take on some aspects of that job, or to just technology itself.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then yeah, and then communication is obviously a big piece. The more you can communicate with your stakeholders, the more efficient, effective you'll be, and the better relationships you'll have.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
So you've been on the RevOps side at a couple of different companies, and we've talked now about the differences between ticket taking and being more strategic. And there's a lot of talk even out there today on still, while RevOps has been around for several years now, it's still this whole question of what is RevOps? What should it be? How do people define it? Some folks say like, hey, RevOps is just like sales ops rebranded. And so then they're like, hey, we
Right.
should like start calling it go-to-market ops instead, which I disagree with. But so there's this whole question of what should it look like versus what does it look like today? And then also how companies choose to define it and even the value that they look to place on it. And you hit on some of this before of the differences between ticket taking and being strategic, but then also like when you're even looped into things, right? If you're like looped in at the last minute just to basically like put your stamp of approval on things so that the people can say that you were involved in the process. There's not a whole lot of quote unquote value being placed on like your role. So based on your experiences and different companies that you've worked at and even just like your own peers, your colleagues, how do you see any common, I don't know, commonalities or themes with the value that companies are placing on RevOps and for folks out there that are either in a current role or maybe looking for their next role, like what are some of the things that they should be looking at in terms of how companies talk or view their RevOps teams and departments to just ensure that they're landing in the best spot and that these companies are placing the right amount of value on revenue operations and that they're not looking at it as just another ticket taker, if you will.
Yeah, that's a great, those are a couple really great questions. I'll start from the back and go backwards. If through my experience, what I figured out now is when you are trying to land a role or you're interviewing for these positions, I would ask everybody you're interviewing with, how do they define RevOps with their company? I think that's going to give you the most insight on how they actually see it. And earlier in my career, I wish I would have asked those questions because that's where you're setting yourself up with, okay, this company views it as the Salesforce admin. That's all you're going to do. That's all they see it for. It doesn't matter the experience you bring, the strategy you bring, any of your opinions or things like that. You can help try to redefine their definition. But if in their job responsibilities, that's really where a lot of that responsibility lies. And your hiring manager is telling you, hey, I just really need somebody to tackle Salesforce. I need somebody that knows it. They can help with the processes. You already know you're setting yourself up to be the Salesforce admin and not really lend to strategy or the business goals. That's a battle that it's hard to do because it's out of your control. You're relying on other people to bring you in. And if you're not brought into those thoughtful conversations, you can't really lend a hand. The second part of this is when you're in a role, trying to align yourself with the value of the company. I do think that even companies that have a definition that says, okay, revenue operations is this, you're going to be part of all the operational processes holistically, because that's the key with RevOps. We should know marketing ops, CS ops, partner ops, sales ops. We're not really sales ops rebranded. I agree with you on that. Even though we do float the most in the sales org, we're supporting legal, we're supporting finance, we're supporting everybody across the board. And it's our responsibility to understand what does the business do and how does everything flow? Because at the end of the day, we're responsible for the customer's journey. How is the customer being touched? Whether it be through the people, through the processes, or through the systems, we should be the know-it-all when it comes to that, and then be able to pick up on those gaps that we're seeing because that affects revenue. Yep. So I feel like that's the part for me. And I have noticed even in companies that I've gone into where they had the perfect definition of RevOps, like the job responsibilities were the same. You go in, everybody respects it. I have my go-to deck that I just reband that says, what is RevOps? Because they don't understand the full concept of it. They have that in theory, but they haven't made a place for it. So you do find yourself still, one, building the trust and relationships, letting people know this is what I can do. Here's how I can help you. Here's what I bring to the table. But then in that proactive sense, saying, hey, I noticed this is a problem. Here's a solution. What do you think? I think that's kind of where you can get more edge of coming to the table with actual strategy and value. Or you do end up just being that report runner, data analyst, Salesforce admin, because you just stick yourself in that role if you're not really coming to the table with solutions or being able to help with the bigger business goals. And it's really
Yeah.
difficult too, because I do feel, depending upon the company, I can use the example at Chronicle. I came in behind somebody that was a Salesforce admin. So at one point, I felt like I did fall into that rut of like, oh, yeah, she's great at Salesforce. But I'm like, oh, no, I know how to do a lot of other things. So it was like me behind the scenes working through the entire sales process overall. And bringing that to the team. And now I'm a year in and it's working. Salesforce, everybody loves it. My data is great. I'm able to run reports and analytics and provide answers so we can make data driven decisions. So sometimes in our role, it does take a while to build the value because, again, we could do quick wins all day, but then you end up the ticket taker versus a lot of our strategy is going to take a little bit longer. So I think
Yeah.
that's part of it. If you're already in the role, how do you provide the value? And then if you're looking for that role, just ask the right questions before, you jump into something and you're like, wow, I wasn't expecting this. Because that's my biggest key is just we're built to ask the questions while you're looking for the job.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the main piece that you hit on that resonated with me, and I know I say this a bunch too, and this probably applies a lot outside of RevOps too, but as it relates to like your role or your career in total, which will span a bunch of different companies, but then at the current company that you're at and the role that you have is the reactive versus proactive piece. And it's like, okay, well, so what does that mean? Well, that means like at the end of the day, like you have ownership over your career again at your current company and at any like in total at any future companies
Right.
that you'll be at. So you cannot expect someone to help you grow or advance. Like you need to do that yourself. And that means like you can't just sit back and wait for someone to give you an opportunity or give you something to
Absolutely.
do that you're good at that can demonstrate your skills because if you've never demonstrated any of that stuff before, then how on earth would you expect them to know that's what you want or that's what you're good at or that's where you want more experience, right? And so,
Right.
yeah, so with that, I think like one, as you to go back to the first thing we talked about, ticket taking versus more being more strategic. Like, first off, one, some people enjoy the ticket taking aspect, and like that is totally fine. But if what you
Right.
want is to be more strategic in your revenue operations role, then again, take ownership over that. Don't expect the company to hand you things. Go out and get them, right? Earn them. And then the same thing with companies and like valuing the revenue operations role. I think like what you demonstrate can go a very long way towards that company recognizing the value that you can truly bring. But again, it's up to you. It's not up to anyone else to do for you.
Absolutely. Because you're in control of building the relationships where you're at as well. So if you're bringing people along on the journey and you're having these thoughtful conversations with your stakeholders, that can push you along too, because then they start to understand what you're bringing to the table slowly. And then you can start to align your strategy with what they're thinking. As an example, your CRO is trying to clean up the pipeline. You look at the data and it's a disaster. You look at your CRM and you're like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. People aren't following the process. You can kind of lean in on that and say, okay, I see these are the things that are happening. Here are some of the things I'm going to do to clean that up and just be proactive about it. If you see it and you notice it, you don't want to continue to see all of the bad stuff without providing a solution. And you can then go to that CR and say, I went ahead and cleaned up all of the pipeline for you. Here's how it's aligned. Here's your report. Here's whatever the tool is that you're using for forecasting. And here's what we've been able to see. So we're about to forecast X, Y, and Z. And it's amazing
Yeah.
when you start to make their jobs easier. It's like, oh, okay, well, you teach them to ask you and lean on you for those things and your thoughts. Because if they do just view you as the ticket taker, they're not going to come and ask your opinion on something. So you want to
Yeah.
continuously learn and provide feedback, or when you're noticing things, be proactive in fixing it versus sitting back waiting for somebody else to come complain to you and tell you it's terrible. And now you have to be in reaction mode because you have to go clean it because it's a fire, it's urgent, where you may have been sitting there noticing it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a big piece of this is putting yourself in the shoes of the stakeholder that you're supporting or group of people that you're supporting, whether that's the CRO or your stakeholders like the VP of marketing, the VP of sales, the VP of CS, your CEO. And again, think about the things that are important and relevant to them and what they're trying to accomplish and being able to proactively provide them with solutions to help them accomplish those
Right.
goals is a way that you can get very far, which brings me into kind of the next question around like goal setting for your RevOps team and how to best align those to the company goals and objectives. So previously, when I was a VP of business operations at an OKR software company, so this whole notion of like company objectives and then team objectives and individual
Right.
key results is very like near and dear to my heart. And we still do quarterly OKRs at RevOps Co-op and company objectives, team objectives, individual KRs. And this is another way to, if you think about things through this lens, this is also another way to move from ticket taking to being that strategic leader where your company places a lot of value on the revenue operations role. Because I think the way that any operator should think is how you can drive the best outcomes for your business. And again, like these business objectives, they change on any given quarter, on any given year, right? So they never stay static, right? It means that one
Right.
quarter, the business may be hyper focused on reducing churn and improving renewal rates. The next quarter could be all about like new logo acquisition, or maybe after that, it's about driving expansion revenue, or maybe you've got some new big feature release. It's about like product marketing efforts and how you can raise awareness of that within your current customer base. So there's a lot of these things that happen
Right.
that operators can impact. But you've been in these RevOps leadership roles. Now you've probably been responsible for setting goals or objectives. So let's maybe start with the stuff that works before I start asking you about the stuff that doesn't work. So what's the best way, like what mindset do people need to be in, or what are the best practices around looking at company level objectives that your business has, and how should RevOps specifically think about aligning their own objectives to those company goals, given that what we just talked about before, the RevOps charter can be very broad and supporting a bunch of different teams and departments.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest ones is make sure you're a part of those conversations. And if you're not, asked to be a part of it. Because again, if you are providing value to the company, you want to make sure you're aligned to what the company is talking about. I think that's one of the biggest ones is you've built those relationships. Now you need to have those conversations, because if you do, by the time you get to Q4 of the year, you're not hearing what the company is driving. At some point, you have to go ask for those. So I think a lot of it is the collaboration and clear communication and prioritizing that communication, because you want to provide value to the company and what the business is striving to go forward on. Part of it, because a lot of your projects are going to support the revenue growth, the customer experience, cost reduction, normal stuff that companies always are looking at no matter what they're doing. And then providing the regular syncs with your stakeholders. Hopefully you're doing that already. Because then you should be getting the communications of what the business goals are. So I think for me, a lot of it is that constant communication, knowing what the business goals are, and you have those. So then when you're getting to your planning period, you can look at the business goals and say, okay, I have this amount of projects. These are the things that has been requested. It could be new systems, new processes. We need to do this. Here's a gap. We need to fix it. And then aligning those priorities to what the business goals are, and then figuring out what are your hot topics, what are your top priorities, and what are the low. And then we already know we always get way more than we bargained for. So then it's readjusting those and saying, okay, I only have bandwidth for X, Y, and Z. Which one do you want me to focus on first? If you don't know, ask your stakeholders. Which one is the most important? This is what I need to focus on, and have your timeline set. I think that's one of the biggest keys with RevOps too. If you don't know project management, learn project management, because you're going to have to stick with timelines and make sure things are being done. And then empowering the teams to help you and back you up on it. So I think really aligning those OKRs to the business goals, you have to do that. Even though you'll break down your team goals, we all have our personal performance plans with our SMART goals, with our teams. This is what we want to accomplish, whether it be improving our own SLAs or getting things rolled out. But I think the biggest ones for me is definitely understanding what is the business trying to do at this point. But like you said, you may go into a year with that plan, and then it's going to fluctuate. It could be market, quarterly, monthly. They may be making a huge change internally. So I think that's the flexibility of RevOps, of being able to realign that stuff. And it's the communication and the collaboration with your key stakeholders that really dictate what you're going to do. Because you can't
Yeah.
pick one thing that you want to do that may be a top priority for you if you're going to drop the ball with the people that have to deal with the customers. I look at an example of, we all are always cleaning data, no matter what we're doing, but a lot of it is behind the scenes. So currently for my team, we're doing a huge contract cleanup. It's all on the back end, like finding our contracts, putting them into the contract object in Salesforce, because we know long term it's going to benefit the company. Nobody needs to know that. It's our goal to have it done by the end of the year, but we also have an implementation of CPQ, top priority. It affects my stakeholders, it affects revenue.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of like, I'll go play with the contract stuff when I have time, but the key focus is this because it's part of the business goals. So I think that's part of just being very clear with what comes before what, and then communicating with your stakeholders about it.
Yeah. And for me, always defaulting and thinking first about whether it's a new request or even actions that you're going to take, like you just mentioned, working on cleaning up like contracts versus CPQ implementation is like, what are, again, the company goals or objectives that I am impacting with this specific work that I'm doing.
Right.
And even bringing stakeholders along for the ride on that. And I know I've got a couple of examples of this in my past life. People asking for new tools or solutions happens all the time. And
we want this fancy, great thing. We can do it now. Yeah. It's really easy. Just plug it in.
Yeah. And someone, I remember in this specific case, someone came and was like, hey, I want to, it was a VP marketing was like, hey, I want to buy this gifting platform. And instead of just being like, okay, does it integrate with Salesforce, or like starting to ask those like tactical questions, like my first question to him was, what OKR is this going to help us with this quarter? And he was like, oh, I'm not sure really. I was like, well, what problem are you trying to solve? And it just turned out it was something like he just wanted an easy way to send gifts to like customers. And I was like, we can accomplish that in some different ways. But instead of defaulting to like those tactical get shit done sort of questions that we all have inherently in our nature as operators, just ask like those business questions first. And like those can really get you a long way. And the second thing I'll bring up is I've heard a lot, actually, like from more people than I was surprised by this. Like more people are like, well, how does RevOps impact or influence like revenue at your business? I was like, this is crazy because it seems so obvious to me.
Right.
Again, like the thing to think through is we mentioned company goals and objectives can change, right? Quarter to quarter. Might be new logo acquisition one quarter, renewal rates the next quarter, expansion revenue the quarter after, who knows? But like you as an operator have ownership over people, process, and technology that impacts the entire revenue engine. So take like new logo acquisition for one example. Again, I'll bring up something from my past role. We had one goal around like hitting X dollars of like new business, and it was like, okay, how can I in RevOps impact that? I'm not selling, I'm not going out and like closing deals, but it was like, look at like the process, right? Are there things in the process that I can help impact and influence? One of them was related to this. We had this free trial version of our product, and it turned out one of our SDRs was having to do just like a lot of manual like digging through of like data to try to identify opportunities that he could reach out to and try to book like meetings for our like pro plan, which was like a higher price product. And so I was like, okay, let's figure out how to streamline that process. And we ended up like providing some business logic on top of it, and then they just flow through right into the CRM. Like that saved him a bunch of time that he can now go out and do like and actively sell. And so like you can place value on time, right? Be like, hey, I've saved X number of minutes per day for this SDR, multiply that by 5, multiply that by 52. You now get like dollar amount that you can apply to that. And same thing, you can look at expansion revenue is, okay, what's our process for identifying expansion opportunities? How do those get handed off from, say, CS to your account executive? If you can impact things there, like that has a direct impact on the revenue outcomes for the business. So that's how you can think about, at least that's how I've thought about kind of those individual key results or things that you might own as a revenue operator and how you can directly tie them to those business outcomes that we were just
Oh,
talking about.
absolutely. It's work smarter, not harder. If you're making all of your individual stakeholders more efficient by saving them time that they can spend selling and generating revenue, you're doing your job. But it is interesting because, especially with the macro environment right now, because we already know there's a lot of layoffs going on, and I'm hearing fellow other RevOps leaders being let go. And you'll say, "Hey, how many people were on your team?" They're like, "Oh, I was the only one." And it's sad because that letting your RevOps leader go, if they were responsible for something big in the company, that's going to impact your revenue because now you have nobody there to coach, enable, manage your systems, manage your processes, whatever they may have come up with that. And I have heard companies made that mistake and then they're soon calling somebody back, "Hey, we need you back." So again, it goes back to in our beginning of the conversation is the value of the company, making sure that the company understands what does RevOps do. And I love that. That's one of my interview questions. I love to always find what are people's definitions of RevOps. But I think it's really important. I'm always like the work smarter, not harder, anything that we can put in place to save time and spotting the revenue gaps. There were things, as an example, the opportunity management process here, there wasn't in any automation or requirements. So we would send a proposal out to a customer and this opportunity would just fall into oblivion. No follow-ups, no nothing. They would just sit there in the pipeline forever. And you're like, when were you going to call this person back? Oh, well, I didn't even know it was there. So you create like a follow-up, you create some automation, you create some email reminders. But if you don't have somebody paying attention to all those little details in the weeds, you can't really improve the process because your sales team is focused on sales. They're not worried about anything else. Your SDRs, they're worried about generating meetings. Your marketing, they just want to get leads rolling in. Your CS and account managers, they want to keep the customers happy. So you have to be the eyes across the board, being able to see for everybody else the things they can't see, because again, it's a seamless flow of information that directly impacts your revenue line with the customers. I don't know how many companies struggle with that customer retention churn issue, that if they would clearly just identify those gaps in your process, where is the most friction caused for these customers? Is it the handoff? Is it coming in? Is it your onboarding? Is it your implementation? Is it the sales process? And usually your RevOps people have enough ears to the ground that they know, because they've heard the teams complaining about it. Like, "Oh, I lost this customer because of this." And I think that's part of that piece of work smarter, not harder. And where's the value? Where do we bring the value?
Yeah, makes sense. And I have two more questions for you. One is, I'll say like work related. The other is not. So first question. So I know one of the other areas you're passionate about is just how to best support women in technology and overall operations. We won't get political on this podcast, but we obviously just went through an election where there was a female candidate up for election. We've also all seen plenty of posting on LinkedIn and elsewhere that just like loves to, I'll say, showcase a lot of men and male CEOs, for example. And I will fully recognize the privilege that I've had in my professional career being a white male CEO as well. So how can we, the collective, we, men, women, people that are in business, how can we best support women in technology and operations?
Thanks for bringing this up. Yeah, I'm very passionate about this. I feel like it is one of these topics where everybody should be an ally of everybody. If you're bringing yourself with the diversity to the table and you're providing the skills and the knowledge and you're bringing things to the table, no matter what the gender is, I feel like that should be respected and recognized. Because at this point in time, regardless of what happened with the election and all that kind of stuff, we're all human. We all still have to make money. We all still have a job. We all still want to work together. And there are a lot of us women. I've been in situations where it's a male dominated industry and you are put in this position where you feel like you have to be a man to be equal. But you do see a lot of the misogyny and the mansplaining and all of those things that we all come up with our little acronyms for. And it's working through that, but then also having the tough conversations. I feel as I've grown in my career, I'm not afraid to have difficult conversations. Because again, it goes back to grade school when you were getting bullied or you didn't stand up for yourself. And I would say you learn how to be professional and have hard conversations, but then also hard conversations with the rest of the key stakeholders at the top. Because a lot of that leadership comes from the top down. If your senior leaders are proponents and allies and they're into your diversity and inclusion initiatives and they're very open and you know that you have a diverse selection of people working for your company, those companies, and I will be honest, a lot of people that I talk to when they are looking for new roles, they go straight to the website and look at who's in charge. They want to know, especially from women and other diverse backgrounds culturally, you want to know the kind of company you're going into because you can tell by the leadership and who is actually the leaders there, how diverse they may or may not be. But I think really the biggest part for me is be an ally, be there to support people, be open to new ideas, bring people into the fold, bring people on the journey with you. Try not to be that siloed decision maker of, oh no, they don't need to be in it. Because again, there are probably people that still have that old school mentality of they don't want to include other people. But I think it's diversity drives results. Not everybody has all the answers. So the more diverse, the more different points of view or experience that you bring in, I think the more innovative the ideas are, I would say. But then just being very, especially just in the climate, just be cognizant of how your other executives may be feeling, women, other diverse cultures working with you. Just because there are a lot of other pressures coming from other places, you don't want to come to work and have to deal with it too. Yeah. So I think that's the biggest part for me is having those conversations and being okay with it. Because I think what I've seen and what I've experienced, some executives in a male role, they're more uncomfortable having those conversations than your female leaders or other cultural people are there, because we've had to have those our whole entire life.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And I like what you said about being, I think, like thoughtful and intentional. So one, you mentioned have those hard conversations, right? Like nothing will get done or accomplished if you don't. And then the other aspect of that is be intentional about yourself with those diverse perspectives. Because again, like the whole reason why this has become an issue is because we haven't been thoughtful or intentional about it. And so in order to create a new habit, right, if you will,
right.
of building a diverse team or background, group of backgrounds, like you need to be thoughtful and intentional about it. I know I have to remind myself about that frequently with RevOps Co-op. I was proud the other day when I was looking at our team. I think we have eight people on our team between employees and contractors. 6 are women. It's me
Amazing.
and one other person that are men. I know for our speakers for our conferences, like I measure the percentage of male versus female speakers, men versus women that are speaking, and have targets for getting those to be 50-50 across the board for all of our events. So again, like those are just examples of things where like your default maybe not to do those things, but it should be, because again, you need to be like thoughtful and you need to place some intention on that, or your habits and your default will never change for the better.
Absolutely. And you're leading the way. So thank you for doing that. You're stating it, you're leading the way. You lead a huge organization and community that has a lot of influence. So I think your intention of doing that will rub off on others as well, because that's what we want to do. We're all influencers in our own way, and we all try to lead by example that way. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and then I appreciate that. And be thoughtful about, like you said, the things that, like the privilege that you may have yourself, and then also just the feelings and whether it's privilege or lack of privilege that other people have had around you too. That'll go a long ways.
Absolutely.
All right, and so now my non-related ops related question, which I didn't tell you I was gonna ask this, so I'm getting
No,
your
so
like
this one
off
is
the
going to be,
cuff.
I gotta think on my feet for this one.
Yeah, exactly. So I mentioned our conference a little bit. So RevOpsAF is our annual conference. Next year in 2025, we're going to be holding it in New Orleans. The first week of May, we'll have 300 to 350 people there at the event. It'll be a lot of fun. So I want you to imagine that say you're the opening keynote speaker at the conference. We've got 350 people in the main stage kind of area. We call your name. Everyone starts cheering. They're super excited for you to come on stage and speak. You're entering stage left. What would be the walk-up song that you would play as you entered the stage to either get yourself hyped up, get the audience hyped up? Like, what would be the song that you would choose?
Oh my goodness. You definitely put me on the spot. Okay.
There's no wrong answer.
I know there's no wrong. It's probably going to be a Drake song.
Okay.
As crazy as that sounds. Maybe I would probably go with Started from the Bottom, but We're Here.
Yeah. I like that.
kind of seems like because the chorus kicks up.
Yeah.
That might be,
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a huge music person too. So I was just like,
Yeah.
oh gosh, it's almost like what would be my walk-up song when I'm going to bat?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I asked this question to someone the other day, and they were like, it should be illegal to ask a musician that question because they were also like, I don't know how I choose. I think they
Well, and
ended
it's
up
interesting.
choosing
So both
AC/DC
of my
instead.
sons played baseball. So I was the baseball DJ for baseball for 6 years doing
Ah, there you go.
walk-up songs. So I'm like, oh goodness, there's so many good ones out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you made a fine choice. So
Yeah, that would be pretty entertaining.
yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Tana, thank you very much for joining and for dropping some knowledge on us. Everything from being strategic to how to make the best RevOps goals and align them with your company goals to what your walk-up song would be at RevOpsAF. I appreciate it. So thanks, Tana.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Keep it RevOpsAF.
For more great content like this, join our community at RevOpsCoop.com and check out the links provided in the show notes.